I would now like to turn to our last speaker of the session before we open it up to the audience, and why it is important to hear him last among all the panelists, because he is Mr. Amit Prothi. He is the DG for the Coalition on Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, and we've all talked about adaptation and finance and vulnerability. So it is extremely important for us to hear from him the challenges as he sees it, the need for finance, and perhaps something encouraging on the finance aspect itself. Over to you, Dr. Prothi.
Thank you, Secretary Nandan, and all the esteemed panelists. I mean, it's quite a privilege to be here. I want to congratulate WSDS and TERI for not only 25 years, but continuing a discussion that only becomes more and more important every year, frankly, right? A lot of things have been said, and I want to pick up because I represent an organization that's focused on disaster resilient infrastructure. So I'll start with one number, which is that when we look at infrastructure, the amount of infrastructure we have to build in the next 20 years is what we built over the last 200 years. That is an opportunity for us. The pace of change that's going on in not only our country, but around the world is incredible. And can we make a difference there? That is the opportunity for us. There are investments already going in the infrastructure sector. We talk about Viksit Bharat in India. We talk about funds needed, but funds are going in as well. And the opportunity is, can we shift the narrative where adaptation, mitigation, resilience are not outside of what development is today? Can we actually really talk about development as adaptation, development as mitigation? The evidence is there. I mean, I don't need to repeat, there's lots of numbers there. The question is, how do you do it? So because we sit in the infrastructure space, we're working now across 40 countries, trying to see how we can start to influence those marginal changes that are needed to make a road more resilient to landslides, to make your power sector more resilient to cyclones, to make your telecommunications sector more reducing disruptions when there is a interruption that happens, right? When we talk about adaptation, and a lot of people have already said, it's not tomorrow, it's today. I moved to Delhi back after a long time, 4 years back. And it was dead heat in the summer, and we were enjoying our air conditioning house at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and the bell rings. And my poor guard, I think we live in those elite colonies. My guard comes and red in the face and says, "Sir, can I get some ice?" And I look at it and I felt terrible that here I am talking to the world about adaptation, and here in front of my house is somebody who needs to be immediately protected from the extreme heat conditions that are ongoing. I use that example because it is not tomorrow's problem, it is today's problem. And every action that we're taking, all of us are in a way sitting in a space where we are already investing in something. And when we say adaptation needs that much money, we kind of forget that how do we change that marginal change that we need to bring to do adaptation today. So, we spent a lot of time with governments mostly for the time being. We worked with the state of Odisha, which faces cyclones quite regularly, to try to get a methodology out there to say, when you're looking at your transmission and distribution system that gets damaged because of cyclonic activity, how do you address it from a financial instrument that makes sense for you? If you look at upgrading the entire coastline, it's going to be X billions of dollars. If you look at where vulnerability exists along those coastline, which distribution system, which transmission system is serving which community, which aspect. So when you start to introduce elements of vulnerability, you start to break down the problem into much more manageable ways of addressing the problem. And now the Asian Development Bank is in discussions with the state of Odisha to say, okay, can we support that? Because we understand how it is bankable, right? So Because we work in the infrastructure space, we're spending a fair amount of time trying to unpackage this problem of adaptation and disaster and mitigation and development that are sitting in different boxes. And the frame that I've used, and I'll just talk about it for 30 seconds and then make a pitch for a report that we've published at COP that actually is incredibly rich in a lot of this material, which was done in partnership with the World Bank and others. When you think about a disaster, a cyclone, a flood, a landslide, there are three parts to it from the infrastructure side. How does your infrastructure absorb that shock? So what all do you need to do ahead of time so that when the landslide happens or when the cyclone comes, your infrastructure can absorb it? Retrofitting it, funds to retrofit it, codes and standards, etc. When your infrastructure is damaged, because it will get damaged, you can't avoid all losses. When it gets damaged, how do you make sure it recovers quickly? So for example, we're working with 3 Caribbean islands that get hit quite regularly by cyclones. They don't get hit at the same time. They get hit at different times. And what we are working with them to do is, can they store supplies where if there's a cyclone that hits one island, they can very quickly recover because the supplies are available nearby and the capacity is available nearby. So this ability to quickly recover out of that shock, and then long-term recovery. There's enough evidence that shows that when a disaster happens, the longer it takes to recover, the bigger the impact on your economy. So what can you do? And that's where insurance and that's where other mechanisms can come into place, where you say, I understand my risk, I understand how to absorb it, I can't address all my risk, I understand how to immediately reduce the impact of the disaster, and then I understand how to recover it in the long term. And I've thought about financing from all those perspectives. So this is, we're calling it a risk layering approach, where different instruments are addressing different facets of this challenge. Again, I'll make a pitch. Please go look at our report on our website. We launched it at COP. It's probably one of the most intense work around resilient infrastructure that exists globally. Please do look at it. Thank you.